Hello, my name is JWood, and for my senior internship project, I decided to look at technology and education, which leads right into my research question, which was what role does technology play in the learning process? The reason I wanted to look at this question was because 2 summers ago, I was offered a place in a program at the school named the Early College Scholarship Program, which is basically a dual enrollment program which allowed me to graduate college and high school at the same time from PVCC this coming May. And I decided to do it, but the only catch was that all the classes were online, and I sort of wanted to look at how the technology, the learning online, compared to a traditional classroom per se. And the research on this was not that extensive actually when it's comparing the traditional classroom and the technology, but there are definitely many different spectrums to it. So a lot of the research I found was biased, and I didn't really find a definitive answer. But what I did discover was that technology, when used secondary to a traditional classroom, it can be very beneficial, and it's also very helpful when working with disabled students that might not have the same abilities as their peers at that time. And for my internship, I was not able to work with technology in educational aspect, but I was able to work with software that I was able to look at basically what made a good software program that students could possibly use. And I was able to attain an internship with a local businessman named Paul Narrow, who works out of Shipman, Virginia, which is 10 to 15 minutes away. And Paul, he owns this software called Pet Executive, and he sells it to different pet companies all around the world, and it basically allows them to do anything they want to do with their business. They can keep track of their customers' pets. They can bill their customers, do things like that. His software is actually so good that he's one of the worldwide leaders in the specific software that he makes, and his products held very high esteem among his customers. And when I went to work with him, he was in the process of making a new version of his software. So I was beta testing a lot on different browsers. For example, the program might not like something in Chrome, but it could like it in Mozilla. And I would have to basically mark when there was an error, and he would fix it because the code that he was working with was far beyond my comprehension. It was very complicated. But near the end, I did get to do a little bit of coding in HTML, which is what the World Wide Web usually uses for websites. And I was very grateful for the experience, and he was even so kind as to put me on my service contact, which was actually his wife, Martina, who's with us today. And when I began working with Marty, she's a webmaster for the NCCO, which is the Nelson County Community Orchestra, and they were in the process of pretty much making a completely new website from the one they already have, because the old one wasn't perhaps the best. Okay? But the first thing we actually did was make a sketch of the website on just a regular piece of notebook paper. And it basically entails all the pages that the website would have, and what content went where on which page, and how the pages related to each other. It was a lot of brainstorming and a lot of erasing and trial and error. But once we had that down, we knew what we wanted to go in. They had a very basic template for the website. So basically all that needed to be done was the content needed to be plugged in, and we needed to put like bells and whistles on that and personalize it to their organization. And I did get to code a little bit more with this because the code wasn't perhaps as complicated as my internship, but I was very grateful for the experience, and thank you a lot. Um, some things I learned on this experience is that code is very complicated and intricate, and there are many ways to get to point A to point B. It's not just one straight narrow path. And I think it's sort of cool that when a programmer is writing, the different way they do things, it sort of acts as a signature they put on their program. So like you can recognize it's theirs just by how they do some things, and I thought that was very cool. Another thing is that when working with web design and software development, things take a lot of time. Like I said, this thing took probably 3 or 4 hours to do, even though it's not a lot. There's lots of erasing and reworking things. Also, you'll spend a lot of time looking for errors in your code and finding you're trying to fix it. And you spend hours doing that pretty much, and it's very frustrating. You need lots of patience. Yeah. Another thing I also learned is that perhaps web design and software development is not necessarily for me. I don't think I have quite the right mind or patience for it. It's like I said, you spend a lot of time looking at your mistakes and trying to find them. So I'm glad I did it before I went to college and perhaps chose a major I wasn't going to enjoy that much. Some advice to rising seniors who are doing this project is to put quality over convenience and ease. Because I think if you put the quality first, you're going to have a much better project than if you did the other way. Also is not do this. In my case, I didn't do my internship at the beginning of the year, but I did get confirmation from Paul that I could do it. And that confirmation, let alone, gave me lots of more time than my classmates who might have not been so fortunate. So I know you're going to hear this a lot today, but the earlier the better, basically. As for my future, I am going to do an enlistment in the Air Force for 4 years starting in July. And after the 4-year enlistment, I'm going to go to a 4-year university or college for either mechanical or electrical engineering. I don't know which college yet, but obviously, as time progresses, I will make that decision. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Your 11th grade class, right? All, I mean, you get to use anything you learned in that class.
We learned in the 11th grade class, we learned Java, so it wasn't the exact same code, but conceptually it did help a little bit. But I would say I enjoyed the 11th grade class, so that did influence this, but there's a lot more than what you learned. Any other question? Yes.
In terms of courses you took through internet-based distance learning,
Right.
compared to face-to-face instructional courses, they could be a blended model with technology. You have direct teaching interaction. Been able to form an opinion that you prefer one over the other?
Personally, I think learning in an actual classroom setting is much easier, just because they're physically there and you can ask them questions and they can show you how to do things instead of having to email them. But that can definitely change on a student-to-student basis. But in my opinion, it's easier in a classroom setting instead of distance learning.
I understand the difficulty that you had in interning and doing your community service was something that related specifically to technology in the educational process,
Right.
and I see that you adapted and worked with what was available to you, and you seem to have learned a great deal from it.
Right.
Could you speak to your research and how it answered your question about what role technology plays in the learning process? I know you mentioned briefly that it was useful as a secondary method or as assistive technology for students with learning disabilities. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So when you learn the initial information or whatever, the lessons initially in the classroom, it's important that you're actually there and you understand the concept. But technology, what it's good at, is good at repetition and sort of drilling the idea in your head. It can be very helpful when you're doing things that are like repetition, like answering math questions, as long as you understand the concept well. It can also be very helpful when I'm dealing with things like English or humanities when it's not quite, you don't need to actually like see it like you do in math per se. It's more abstract perhaps, but yeah.
As a follow-up to that, do you have any suggestions for our school as we prepare to go one-to-one next year? How can we best utilize technology in the classroom?
I would say you should definitely open students' minds up to technology, but they probably shouldn't be in situations where they have to sit in front of a computer for 3 straight classes like I am.